I went to Newark the other day and look what we bought. Amal Concentric MK1 930 series. So we're going to strip this down, have a look at it, see what it needs, see how they're made up. I'm going to fully overhaul it, check out the pilot mixture airways and all the other things that these carbs are famous for. So to start with, let's whip those two screws off and have a look inside. Off comes the top. Obviously no cables there. I have got the springs, they're in a separate packet. There is the choke valve. There is the air valve. Now I'll probably replace that because that's a bit scuffed up, but that probably would clean up. I mean, there's a bit light scuff in there really, but I could probably get that looking quite nice, but I'm going to replace it anyway. I'm going to put new air valves in it. So now we've got that off, we can have a little look inside, see what it's like inside there. We'll have a in detailed look in a little while. So the next thing to be aware of is pretty much the let's take the float chamber off. These two screws here, boff, boff. That there is the fuel screw with the filter gauze. I should probably put new gauze on. Obviously I'll need a new banjo because the banjo's not there. This is the drain plug. Obviously new gasket there, or seal. Now let's take these two screws off and get the float chamber off. Take out the two screws and then remove the float bowl carefully to make sure that nothing falls out. Put the car body to one side. What we're going to do now is remove the gasket carefully. Obviously the gasket is going to be replaced, so it doesn't really matter if you tear it, but just carefully remove it. And then tip the bowl upside down to allow the float pin and the needle valve to fall out. Look inside the chamber to make sure that it's fairly clear. This one looks really nice actually. Then the float itself looks really nice as well. Check the condition of the valve. So I'm not sure whether you can see that, but this needle valve is has got quite a few marks on it, so obviously I would be changing it anyway, but you can see the reason why you change it, because those marks potentially are ways that it's going to leak. So now looking at this, good look around. Some carburetors have a pilot jet there, not all do. Some have a pilot jet there. Just make sure that that hole's not threaded, which means that you might have a pilot jet but it's not there, it's gone missing. This one is just a hole. There's a couple of marks around the hole, which is a little bit worrying. That the pilot feed goes along there, then along there into the throat of the carburetor. Now the next thing to do is to remove the jets. So what we do now is one spanner on there and then one spanner there. Nice and gently, don't force it. Put it to one side. We're not going to worry about it just yet. Then remove this holder, and once the holder's out of the way, there's another jet there, and once again just gently remove it. This is loads of corrosion and dust and that here. Put that to one side. We're going to look at these in great detail later on during the inspection phase. This is just the stripping down phase. So that's that part off. Now the next bit we're going to do, these two screws here, throttle stop screw, pilot air screw. Just remove them in the normal way. Shouldn't be any issues. This one here is the pilot air. It's worth turning it in and seeing how far it'll go before it stops. That doesn't even go a quarter of a turn. They're supposed to be 1.5 turns out when you set the thing up. So this is interesting. This has been turned right in. The float tickler, normally leave that in. There's no real valid reason to take it out. Just look at everything else on the body to make sure there's nothing broken, hanging off or mullered. And then basically we're then going to go into the cleaning phase. There you go then. Amal Concentric MK1, fully stripped. Now we begin the job of looking at every single bit, clean every single bit, and then inspect every single bit. Obviously there are some things that are going to be thrown away even without even thinking about. Gaskets, seals, all that sort of stuff. I always replace the needle valve. I'm going to check the jets very closely, put the body in the ultrasonic cleaner to see what happens when it comes out. Okay, so that's where it's going to go now. It's going to be cleaned, and then once it's cleaned we'll come back and have a proper look at each item. So there you go then, the carb is now clean. I've got a few bits and pieces as well just to sort of run you through. There's the bits of I've cleaned the jets up. The jets are absolutely immaculate. Cleaned all the float, everything's fine. Even the gauze filter is in excellent condition, so I will reuse that. Sometimes I replace that. The needle is superb, cleaned up great. I've got a new gasket set. I've got a new slide and even a little bell mouth extension, which is nice. The carb body and the float chamber cleaned up okay. The bits I'm replacing, the slide, which is in that box, is brand new. The needle valve I'm going to replace, and the gaskets obviously in the O-rings and all that. But chatting to a couple of my mates, and they saw that and they went, "Mate, that ain't clean." I said, "Go on then, you fucking clean it then, if you reckon you can do it better." So they went, "Okay, yeah, we will." So they're coming round in a minute to clean that up. Let's see what they do. Yeah, so here's the float bowl, and my mates are here now. We've got Mr. Ottosol, everybody calls him Solvo, and Monsieur Dremel. He reckons he's a high flyer when it comes to cleaning. Well, go on then, mate. You two, I'll leave you with it. I'm going to go and have a cup of tea. Let's see what it's like when you've finished. Oh, bloody hell. Monsieur Dremel and Bruv Solvo. Did a nice job there, boy. How about now doing something with that? Oh well, I had a cup of tea now, and let's see what they've done. Oh. 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 have a look outside. That's nice, isn't it? There you go then, all now ready, cleaned up, ready for rebuild. So before we do anything, we've got to go through the common checks on the Amal Mark 1 Concentric, which is the idle circuit, and I'll show you that next. Amal Concentric Mark 1. Pilot air problems. These carburetors are well known for it. I'm just going to show you how I fix it. Might not be the best way, but it's the way that I do it. Now, so that you know, just in case you don't know, this is the pilot air screw in here, and air gets drawn up that hole. Air comes along that tube there, is metered by the air screw that is there, and then the air comes through into this section here. There is 2 holes there, which is where the air and fuel mixture come up into the throat. The fuel side, because we've just looked at how the air gets in, the fuel side comes through this hole here. Now, if you look at the float bowl, there's 2 holes. They both go down there into the bottom, into where the fuel is. And these holes, there's 2 here, and it depends on which sort of carburetor you got, left or right, which one's being used. Because as you can see on the carburetor itself, there's 2 sections where those holes can come to. On this particular carb, that side is the one that is used. That one's not a hole, it's not been bored through. The fuel gets sucked up this tube into that hole there, comes down this here, and then there's a 90-degree turn here, and in here, embedded in this body, is a fuel jet, an idle jet. The fuel is metered through that jet and then comes out into those holes. Well, that's right, isn't it? Works, doesn't it? When it's brand new, yeah, it works. After it's been used a little bit, especially if it's been laid unused, you get a collection of crap in this corner. This corner here is full of crap, and because that little jet is there, and it's a very, very, very small jet, it can't be removed, and it is almost impossible to clear it. And even if you can clear it by sticking a bit of wire up there, which you can sometimes, you can clear it through the jet. But what about the crap going up there? All the crap. So you clear it, run it, yeah, bike runs lovely. Fuel comes up there, dislodges some crap here. Blocked up. Fuck. Got to do it again. So, as far as I'm concerned, there's only one way to sort this poxy thing out. And I'm going to show you how I've sorted it out. Now, the thing is, you might not want to do this because it's a little bit involved. Not massively, but it's a little bit involved. But if you want your pilot air system to work perfectly and for you to be able to go out on a bike that runs perfectly, then you've got to do it. Either that, or you can shell out 250 quid a carb and buy 2 new carbs, which is 500 odd quid. But so the choice is yours. Either fix your carbs the way I'm going to show you, buy a set of carbs that have been restored by somebody that's done something of this nature, or go out and buy brand new carbs. because this is a well-known fact, and there is a set of carbs that have now been manufactured. They're called Premier carbs, where they've actually put the pilot jet in there, screwed the pilot jet in there. Much better system. Don't know why they didn't do that initially, but they didn't. So anyway, sit back, relax, and I'll show you how to. All right, get ready, lads. We're going on a run. Down inside there, I don't know if you can see, there is a aluminium plug. We're going to drill that plug out very carefully. Once it goes through, that's it. Now you expand that out with a slightly bigger drill until you've taken out the entire plug. Next, drill this plug out. You're going to drill that out so it's the same size as that, so it's going to give us access to that tube that goes all the way down there. So as you can now see, that plug has been drilled out. That gives me the opportunity now to drill right the way down inside that tube, and there is so much crap in there. I can feel the crap. There's so much crap in there, so I'm going to drill all the way down and dig that right out, right down to that corner, and then I'm going to go right the way through there. Once I've drifted the jet out, I've got to drift the jet out that's in there, then I'll have a clear tube that way, a clear tube that way, and when it's fully clear, I know that I'm ready for the next section. A hole that you can see right the way through. So you can see right the way through there. So that is that drilling across the carburetor, and because that's been taken out and I've drilled right the way down there, I've seen the end of the drill through that hole, so now I know that that's clear as well. So the two tubes, if you like, of the pilot air circuit are completely clear. So now the final thing with this is to give it a good blowing through from all directions. So now we know that those pilot airways are 100% clear, which is superb. So now the next thing we've got to do is this here, which is where the pilot air jet is secured on other types of carburetor. We're going to tap that out. We're going to tap that out 5BA. We're going to run a 5BA tap down there, which will clear those threads out because they've been crimped. That's what those little marks are. That's crimped so that you can't screw a jet into it. So run a tap down there. That will clear that out. We can then put a Mark II jet in there, idle air jet. Then we've got to make a blanking plug up for there and a blanking plug for there. I'll show you how to do that. And then we have achieved what others have strived to do. Then tap this hole. I tapped it M5 because that's what I had, and then get a grub screw the correct size, put some Loctite on it and screw it in, so that way then you've sealed off that passage again. Now then, screwed that grub screw in there. It's had some Loctite on it, so that will secure it. so it won't vibrate out. And if you ever wanted to gain access to that pilot airway again, you could easily remove the grub screw and re-access it. So this is infinitely repairable. So now we do exactly the same here. Thread that, put a grub screw in it to block that end off. Exactly the same thing, a little bit of Loctite, and then basically it's all done then. Blank in there, blanked in there, blown through just to make sure that air still gets round the pilot system the way it should be. And there, the final thing there of this journey is we've tapped that hole out, fitted a brand new idle jet, and now that can be rebuilt. The rebuild continues. In the gasket set, you'll get the float bowl gasket. You get the rubber O-ring that goes on the bell mouth. You get this gasket here, which goes on the float chamber drain bolt. That gasket there, which goes on the fuel bolt, the banjo bolt, and then those two O-rings which go on the air screw and the throttle stop screw. Before we start rebuilding the carburetor, there's a couple of things we need to do. We need to know that the flange is flat. We also need to know that the float bowl surface and the float bowl itself are flat. I'll show you how to do that. To check the face, stick it up to the sky or the sun, get a nice straight edge like a rule, and put it on there so you can see between it. I don't know how well you can see this, but that plate is not flat, so that plate will need to be faced. It's not too far off, but there is a little bit there, little bit. Then put the float bowl onto the carburetor and look to see if you can see anything between the two. Once again, not very difficult, not very easy, sorry, to see in this situation, but I can tell you now that float bowl is nowhere near, so that will need to be faced as well. It's such a common thing on these Amal carbs, especially the float bowl bit, that rocks about like billy-o, and you can't really reface that very easily because of this, but you can reface that. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to reface this to try and get a nice flat connection between the two, which the gasket can take up. So very, very slight amount, the gasket will take that up. This face here, yes, you've got the O-ring, and it's the O-ring that makes the seal, but if the flange is distorted, then it can prevent the O-ring from making a seal, which then makes the carb untunable. So I'm going to flat that off, get it as flat as I can, check it again to make sure it's flat. Then when the O-ring goes on, I know that I'll get a good connection at the manifold. I'm going to flat this off and then see if I can get that also to a nice reasonable situation, so that when the two go together there'll be a perfect seal. That way then this carburetor, when it's finished, will be superb. And there, after a little bit of flattening off, that is now perfect. And that there has come up really well actually, because I've just held that against the carb and there is virtually no gap there at all. If there is a gap, the gasket will easily take that up. So it took a couple of minutes. I used a bit of paper on my drill bed, because the drill bed is nice and flat, with oil on the paper, and just rubbed it and took a couple of minutes. In fact, that's how we used to do it in the old days. Perfect, absolutely perfect, ready for reinstallation. Here you go then, floats. Just fitted the new Viton float needles in, and I've got two types of float. One is the new stay up float, the black one here, and the other one is the original plastic float. Float levels, what a bloody, wow. There is so many different things you see on the internet. Should be this, should be that. You even read the official Amal website, and even that is confusing. There's so many different things about float level. Where the hell do you fit it? Well, we'll talk about that in a minute. You put the float in and put your finger or a tool on the middle part of the pin. Don't put it on the float, put it on the pin, like that. Then you tip the float upside down. And then when it's upside down, you look to see where the edge of the float is. Now you can see there, that is above the level of the float chamber. So that is miles too high. Miles too high. On this one here, same thing. Put your finger on there, tip it upside down, and you can see, or maybe you can't because it's not very good filming, it's literally almost level with the top. So, too high. This one, in order to change the float height on this type of carb, you literally bend those tangs. It's quite easy to do, and you can do it infinitely until you get it right. This type, you cannot bend the tangs because they're plastic. What you have to do, take the float out, and where you get this bush here, you push this bush up or down depending on where you want the float to go. So if you want the float height to go down, and on this one you do because it's above the float bowl, you want it to go down, so you'd have to have that bush up. So you have to take this off and put a drifter in there and drift it until it comes up, and then keep checking it until you get it where you want. Float height itself, 0.02, 0.04, 0.06, 0.08 inches. I've seen 0.21, which is 5 mil. 5 mil. That's that far. That's that far down below the height of the float bowl. The top of the float bowl, sorry, is where it should be when it's shutting the needle valve. Yeah, well, how come then you get a Triumph bulletin stating that it should be 0.04 inches? 0.04. 0.04 is about that. So, 40 thou. So, where the hell do you put it? Well, the thing that you must know about float levels is that the float mustn't be above the edge of the chamber. Mustn't be above. Because when it's built up onto the carburetor, if the float is above the float bowl, it'll hit the carburetor. If it hits the carburetor, it'll flood continuously. So it's got to be below the top of the float bowl. It's got to be below it. It doesn't want to be massively below it, but it wants to be below it. So I think, like most things in repairs of vehicles, motorbikes especially, you cannot give definitive advice and say to people you must do it that way, because there's so many different places that say so many different things about something as simple as a float height. It is so annoying. What I'm going to do here, I'm going to set these carbs up. I'm going to have the stay up floats, and I'm going to set the carbs up so that the height, when it's adjusted, of the float is going to be about 2 mil below the top of the float. 2 mil. That will easily give it sufficient room, and that way then I think that will be safe. That is just my own personal opinion. That's what. So yeah, so what I've decided that the float level in the carbs that I'm going to be doing is going to be using the so-called stay up float, the one with the stainless tab, so you can adjust the stainless tab to get the float wherever you want. That is better than using the original floats. I don't think there's anything wrong with the original floats, but I think that's better than using the original floats. And I'm going to have it so that the float, the top of the float, when it's upside down and the weight of the float is pressing the needle valve down, I'm going to have it so that the top of the float is about 2 mil below the upper level of the float. 2 mil below. That's where I'm going to put it. That's basically my own interpretation of all of the things I've read, and I think that realistically you have to be fully aware of what the float level does. The float level ensures that there's sufficient fuel in the float bowl to maintain the engine at any RPM. If the float level is too low, there's insufficient fuel, and you'll find that at high engine revs, the engine might suck more fuel out of the float than the needle valve can deliver. So therefore you have to have a higher float level, more fuel, so that you don't get fuel starvation. If it's too high, then it will flood. The float will allow fuel to come up, and then it will start flooding into the throat, or you'll get flooding out of the tickle tube on these carbs, and as a result the engine will then be running with too much fuel, will be flooding, and in high circumstances you could even get fuel running into the engine when the engine's off and diluting the oil in the sump, which could cause dramatic problems. So that's why the float level is important. It has to give you the correct amount of fuel, and I reckon 2 mil below the top level means that the engine won't be flooded, fuel will not be flooding into the throat or flooding through the tickler hole, but there will be sufficient fuel for the engine to run at all throttle openings. That is my interpretation of float needle setting. There is so much information about float needle setting on these carburetors on the internet, and it's all conflicting. None of it is definitive. So basically, made me own up. 2 mil. I'm setting it up so that it's 2 mil below the top. So gasket applied. Feed the carburetor into position nice and gently so you don't muck the gasket up. Once it's in position, invert it and then fit the 2 screws. Wind the screws down until they just stop, until they just stop. Don't tighten them up, because if you tighten them up severely then you'll cause warping of the float bowl. So just nip them up bit by bit until you can't move them anymore, and then when you get to that stage, nip them. That's it. Dump. Don't do any more. The float bowl is now in position, ready for the next stage. Yeah, so hopefully what I'm going to do there, that video there shows you this carburetor up to this stage. I'm going to produce another video which shows you about fitting the slide to the cables, fitting the new slide into the carburetor and then fitting it onto the bike. I have got another video that's already out there which tells you about the pilot air issues, which we all know about. I've done a separate video on that, and that's been included in this carburetor. So hopefully check that lot out, and I'll speak to you soon. Later. Bye.